So, you want to know how I built my case against the biggest boss in Burkesburgh, huh? Well, I don't usually do interviews, but if it'll help your viewers write better papers and keep you out of my face, well then I guess I could spare some time. Listen, it's Detective Work 101. You can't just go to the judge and start screaming that Roger Fulano's running the underbelly of the city. It just doesn't work like that, even if you're right, and I had a pretty good hunch. You see, as soon as you start doing that, the bad guy gets his lawyer and they start asking for evidence, and then if you're lucky enough to get a jury that isn't already been paid off, well, then you still have to prove the guy's scum. See, people don't really want to know about your opinions. Opinions, they're like cats. Everyone hates the neighbor's cat. It doesn't matter how much you love that thing, nobody else is getting as big a charge out of it as you are. And it's the same with opinions. You might love your opinions, but people are only going to care about them if you give them a reason to. What, you want me to tell people to subscribe to what? The newspaper? Listen, I'll do this interview, but I'm not shilling for nobody. And let me tell you, if you think I am, well, you've got it. Anyway, it's not going to do anyone any good to just go around writing about what you think. You got to give people a reason to think the same way. You got to show them why you think the way you do, why they should think that way too. You see, you need evidence. You need to show them how that evidence connects to the claims you're trying to make in order to support the argument. So it's like I was saying, I couldn't make my case in court unless I had hard evidence that Fulano was really up to no good. And I had to convince my jury that the evidence I had really did prove what I was trying to say. It's the same sort of thing if you're writing a paper. So why don't you listen up? You just might learn something. So there I was, sitting in my office on a quiet night, wondering where it had all gone so wrong when she walked through the door. It was like a scene out of a cheap picture. I knew it was up before she even started talking. You know, she wouldn't have come to me unless he had gone missing, not the way we'd left things. And June confirmed my hunch right away. She told me Johnny was missing, and she knew Roger Fulano was to blame. You see, Johnny was an alderman, I guess more respectable than I was, but the point is, he was too influential. Only a boss as big as Fulano would be gutsy enough to try to make him disappear. I tried to talk her out of it, well, mostly just to get rid of her, but the thing is, empty claims don't hold up in court, and I wasn't too excited about getting myself involved and maybe finding myself at the bottom of the bay next to Johnny. She knew Johnny was alive and she knew Fulano was to blame. She also knew that if anyone could get her the evidence she needed to bring down the whole operation, it was me. And with that, she had me hooked like a donkey on a dangling carrot. You see, she had a claim, an argument she was trying to make. Johnny was missing and Fulano was to blame. And that thesis was all well and good, but she wasn't going to get very far with claims alone. She needed evidence. That thesis needed support. And she had buttered me up real good, so I got my coat and my hat, and we hit the streets to find some leads. As we headed out, I asked her why she thought Fulano was to blame. She said the last place Johnny was seen was a club run by one of Fulano's known associates. It was the Pearlman Lounge, operated by a character who called herself Sable. It was a starting place, so we headed to the club to look around. Of course, it was about as you'd expect. Sable welcomed us right in like she had nothing to hide. She said she didn't know the two of us were an item again, and I didn't get the chance to correct her first. Not that it matters. Sable did get a kick out of it, though. So she welcomed us in and sat us down in a luxury booth. She wanted to know what was bringing us in to see her. June didn't quite have the discretion for detective work, though. She blurted out that her alderman Johnny had gone missing. Sable made that show of surprise, said she was a respectable business owner, and wondered what my non-girlfriend was insinuating. I tried to calm her down, said we were just looking for information. Sable had connections. Her bodyguard was looking a little beat up, though, and that got me to thinking. So after Sable shooed us out, I circled around back to the alley to poke around. That's where we found Johnny's blazer, or a blazer. June confirmed it was his after finding some mushy note in one of the pockets. There was some blood on the lapels too, though, so I wrapped it up and said we'd take it in for analysis. There was also a loose key in one of the pockets to a storage unit in one of the shadier parts of town, so I said that maybe Johnny wasn't quite so upstanding after all. June wouldn't have any of that, though, but we'll talk more about that later. Point is, the blood wasn't Johnny's. It did belong to one of Sable's bodyguards, so we tailed him to a warehouse where he met with one of Fulano's lieutenants. It was a compelling link to Fulano, but it just wasn't enough by itself. You see, stooges meet each other all the time. Listen, I don't have all night, and this story is kind of wearing thin. Can't I just tell the folks at home what we found, and then, they can fill in the drama and the intrigue on their own? Long story short, by the end of the night, we'd been all over town, picking up clues along the way. We had the jacket, we had photos of that warehouse meeting, we had public records showing that there was a land dispute near the docks. One of Fulano's legitimate businesses claimed a piece of land that was also being claimed by a meatpacking company. That company was planning to sell to the city to make room for a housing project. We even managed to get one of Fulano's assistants to agree to testify that that was what was going on and that his boss had ordered the kidnapping of the alderman in order to persuade him to give up on the idea of developing that land for housing. And that's how this works. You can make accusations and claims all day long, but you have to back it up. The courts want proof, and I assume your readers do too. You gotta give them a reason to believe that what you're saying is true, and that's where evidence comes in. Of course, that doesn't mean that people will just accept the evidence that you're trying to give them, and that's where the real work of making your case happens. When we found Johnny's blazer with that key inside, see, I told you we'd get back to it. I thought it might have something to do with why he was at Sable's that night. Maybe he was involved in something illicit. Maybe moving weapons for Sable's goons or something like that. But here's the thing, evidence is just facts, and facts don't really tell you what to do with them. If I go to court and I tell a judge that somebody is guilty because they've got a key in their pocket, the judge is going to look at me and say the only thing I've proved is that they have a key. It's not just enough to make a claim and then put some evidence next to it. You got to show how that evidence supports your claim. So I was telling June that I'd busted a lot of illegal shipments moving through that neighborhood, and they all went through that same storage facility. If Johnny had a storage unit there, he was sure to be up to no good. But of course, June came right back with her own interpretation of the evidence. Johnny had grown up in that part of town, and he ran a weekend music program for the kids. That's where he stored the instruments. She'd been there a couple of times. She could vouch for him. Now, I'm rarely wrong, but I will admit it when I am. She'd made a convincing link between the key and her claim that Johnny was really not up to anything too unusual. But we had to do something similar with all the evidence we'd picked up against Fulano that night. You see, it wasn't enough that we had testimony from his assistant or public records. We also had to show how that evidence really proved our claim that Fulano was to blame. Disaffected assistants give false testimony all the time. How did we know that this guy was sincere? And those records only showed that Fulano was involved in a land dispute, not that he was up to anything criminal. When it came to trial, the defense was going to do everything they could to try to interpret those facts in a different way, so we had to make sure that we linked the evidence to our claims in a really ironclad way. So think about that when you're writing your papers, or whatever this is about. Don't just put evidence next to your claims. If you're going to get anywhere with your audience, you have to be able to explain how you know that your evidence does, in fact, support the claims you're trying to make. So it's great that you've got statistics and scientific data and all those other things, but facts will only get you so far. The other side can always interpret those facts in a different way and take your claims to task. So remember, your job is not just to present good facts. You also have to present valid and compelling interpretations of those facts. I'm not telling the rest of the story. Listen, we got the bad guy. June and Johnny were reunited, and the only thing I was left with was some mysterious envelope that I'd swiped from Johnny's blazer before we gave it back. Listen, I had a hunch that something bigger was going on, and I thought that envelope was going to be my ticket in. It wasn't really about Fulano's business operations, though. No, I thought that night got me a little closer to figuring out who was really running the city. But alright, here's the deal. When you're making an argument, you're making claims. Claims are those things you want your audience to accept as true. They can be debated or challenged, and you can better be sure that the other side is going to be making claims that are different from yours. Because of that, you have to support your claims with evidence. Evidence is a little harder to debate. If you say that Johnny has a key in his pocket, and he does, nobody can really say that he doesn't. If you've got statistics that show the recycling rates have improved in the last 5 years, no one can really say that they haven't. But evidence doesn't have to support your claim. Every time I take evidence to court, the defense lawyers make a big deal of interpreting all the facts in a different way. Yes, they'd say Johnny does have a key in his pocket, but how do you know that makes him a bad guy? If you connect your evidence to your claims, showing how you know that your evidence really does support the claims you're trying to make, well, then the other side is going to have a much harder time taking you down. Don't just put the evidence next to your claims and leave your audience to connect the dots. Be the detective and show them how those dots connect. Explain the connections between your claims and your evidence, and you'll be making strong cases all over the place. What now? You want me to tell people to like the video? I mean, you can't just tell someone to like something. They either like it or they don't. You think I just dislike Johnny because nobody told me to like him? Listen, I got better places to be. We all do. I'm out of here. John and Junie. Are we still doing this?